Another one of our projects was to look at a way to remove the two-stroke outboard motor from the equation and reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, having to mix fuels, having to deal with repair of outboard motors and maintenance. To that end, we bought a relatively simple outboard motor, 55 pounds of thrust, and a lithium iron phosphate battery, 100 amp hours. Charging, relatively simple. We bought a fold-out solar panel that gives about 100 watts of power, and we can lay this out in the dinghy or on deck. We can charge the battery while we're underway. And this unit has connections inside a pocket, which I've utilized for storage of a Victron charge controller. The charge controller connects the battery on one end, and very simply on the other end has a series of 4 connections that the solar charge controller can plug into the solar panel. And the whole thing just in its pocket, and we will see how this goes when we have an opportunity to test this out on the water. What you're looking at here are our two 200 amp hour lithium iron phosphate batteries, which are the house batteries that power all the needs on Athena. And that's generally been enough for any of our consumption needs. The only problem comes into play occasionally when we have excessively cloudy days or long nights, perhaps days where the sail is occluding any or all of the solar panels, which is relatively rare, but on certain tacks that is possible. So what I went ahead and did is install a DC to DC charger, which basically allows for excess energy to be passed along from the starter battery, which is down in our engine room, onto these two batteries here via a coupling that determines when the engine is running. And when the engine is running, it's producing a higher voltage. The alternator is putting out a voltage in the 14 volt range. And the DC to DC charger senses that higher voltage and turns on the connection, if you will, to allow power to flow from the starter battery through to the house batteries. And really, we're not using the starter battery to charge. We're using the alternator. The alternator is charging the starter battery. The starter battery's full at this point, and the voltage coming off of the starter battery through the alternator is high enough that the DC to DC charger senses that and says, well, there's excess power, let's send it over to the house batteries. So let's take a look at that here. I'll bring you over. And basically it's this little unit right down in here. And this just takes power coming in from the starter battery and provides it onto the bus for the main house. We also have a couple other things installed. This is a Victron Smart Shunt, and that just determines how much energy we're using at any time in the house. And we also have small blinking lights down here, which represent the battery temperature and voltage, which is sent via Bluetooth. And we have, of course, our fuses here in case we have a problem or a surge. Configuration of the DC to DC charger is done through the Victron Connect app, which allows us to bring up the device in question. In this case, we've named it Electra. And right now, the engine sense determines that the engine is off, so it is not charging, and can be configured here with battery settings. You can specify the type of battery, enable or disable the charger manually or via the engine. Specify your absorption voltage and float voltages for your battery, and the amount of time maximum that you're allowed to charge the battery. Engine shutdown detection is determined here by specifying a start voltage. Generally, the alternator will put out a little over 14 volts. So this is where we'll start when it senses more than 14 volts. It'll start at 13.8 with a delay. A delayed start voltage of 240 seconds, which gives the engine about 4 minutes to warm up. And that is pretty much it.
As this is the season of the year for holiday demonstrations of festivity and joy, we, the good people of this city of Williamsburg, do gather and invite all assembled to join in the Yuletide procession as it makes its way down the Duke of Gloucester Street to its final destination of the magazine yard.
Shone through the Depression-era darkness from 5 to 10 o'clock each evening from Christmas Eve until New Year's Eve. A tradition first celebrated as white lighting and years later officially proclaimed as Grand Illumination.
Happy Christmas, Father Christmas!
Wassail! Wassail!